In this video, I'm going to help you, the filmmaker, extract some value out of analysing 3 short music cues from a recent movie, The Wrath of Man in this case. Let me know if this works, and with that being said, let's get going. Let's start by playing each scene that I'm going to look at. So this is all taken from the first 20 minutes. Here we go, let's check it out.
Get these hinges.
Okay, the next scene.
That's quite enough of that.
And the last one.
Did you hear about the guards that were murdered? You know what happened right down there?
Come on, Dave. It's his first day.
What? He needs to hear this.
I want to draw your attention to the fact that all 3 scenes share a common identity. Listen to the first few seconds of each scene again and listen out for the strings. The music is mainly string-based, not surprising because the composer, Christopher Benstead, is a cellist, and the majority of the heavy lifting is accomplished by the cellos and double basses. Musicians use the word motif to describe a common melody or harmonic progression. I think we can all agree on what a melody is. In this case, it's these 4 separate notes. Harmonic progression is a little harder to unpack for non-musicians, but here goes. It's massively important and is what underpins every piece of music you've ever heard. It's the underlying choice of how the mood of a piece of music changes over time. The closest visual comparison is the colour palette of a movie. As you're aware, an entire film's colour palette is no accident and is often closely linked to the emotional storytelling that further describes a plot or a character arc. In this case, the harmonic progression is actually one-dimensional, as we're pretty much stuck in the first choice, which is a minor key, which is to say that the music sounds serious as opposed to positive. The choice of instruments being low strings gives us a brooding, dark and sort of low ominousness. It mimics the mise-en-scène in that the skyline is monochrome and the atmospheric perspective limits our view to some extent. The opening drone or crane shot also emphasises the low aspects of the music as we're literally being brought closer down to the earth. Something double basses help underline, as they are, coincidentally, made of wood, which is trees literally growing down into the earth. So on many levels this is a great choice of harmony, melody and instrumentation. The choice of slow tempo in the string melody also helps ground us, as the speed at which we're processing different musical notes is relatively calm, putting us in a mood of anticipation at this point, not stress. Please note that when I say tempo, this is nothing to do with BPM. We'll explain that in a future dedicated video. The music is saying, here is something serious and cool, pay attention. But it's not strapping you to the front of a car at 100 miles per hour, nor is it taping your eyelids open under duress. This is understated cool at its best. The other instrumentation choice is the percussion, which plays an equally important role to the strings for each of the 3 cues we're looking at in this video. The way this percussion is built up is noteworthy for several reasons. Firstly, it's very ponderous and slowly regular, which I think gives this an industrial vibe and imbues the opening with yet more gravitas. The percussion is often something that you feel as well as hear. In theatres you often experience the low sub-booms in scenes rather than overt drums, for example. And this is adding a similar level of heaviness to the scene and the nature of the call and response between the first big hit and the second metallic echo makes it sound kind of like some cause and effect machinery where something is being struck and then steam is released, for example, a very industrial and powerful sound. The last thing to mention on this is that the bigger hits that are on the strong beats are actually preceded by a tiny bit of silence, which makes the impact even more pronounced. As is often the case, to really emphasize something, it's good if the contrast is big, and this certainly helps set up these awesome hits. In our next scene, our protagonist is going through some kind of process with an uncertain outcome. I won't say anything else as I don't want to spoil this for those of you who have yet to watch this great film. The notable additions and changes to the motif are that the tempo has increased. You can hear the same motif between the scene we just discussed and this one. But the momentum has now increased significantly, adding a sense of heightened anticipation, particularly because we had a benchmark. In and of itself, this still isn't terribly fast music. But because the motif is still the same, and there's thematic continuation, we can really tell that the momentum has increased from the first scene. The other thing that's changed is the higher string elements, like these violas. And we also have the addition of a pedal or pedal point. This is where a note, in this case a high one, but it can just as easily be a low note, and most commonly is in fact, is played throughout a section of music without changing. The word pedal comes from the organ originally, as the organist would use their feet to play notes too, but sometimes just keep one note down throughout a musical passage. It stays exactly the same regardless of what else is going on. You've heard this countless times, used effectively in horror films for example, and it's a common way to build anticipation. The riser here does the same job and also builds in some more power, raising the intensity so we have a more pronounced drop-off when this little section comes to an end. At this point, the instrumentation choice is again interesting, as the wait session foley is supported by some very metallic percussion. There's some deep hits which are composed of an orchestral bass drum and layer in a taiko as well, but crucially the metallic component is produced by a musical anvil in this case. For our last scene, the music changes gear yet again. Our protagonist is entering the new world we've now encountered. The inciting incident has occurred and the story is literally ready to play out. Note that the opening shot is now reversed and we get a lovely crane up shot where we go from the micro to the macro and see the skyline again, but this time it's revealed from below. We're back to our ponderous tempo from the intro scene, but the momentum has increased this time because of more and faster percussive elements. And also because of faster strings that are playing new articulations. Articulations are basically the way in which an instrument is performed. For a piano, there aren't really that many articulations, for example. You essentially touch the keys with your hands and press them down. However, on a stringed instrument, composers have a wonderful variety of performance instructions they can ask the musicians to employ to get some really cool sounds. For example, these basses have been played with the articulation known as col legno, which is Italian for with wood. This means that instead of using the bow the traditional way round and using the stringed side of the bow to make contact with the strings on the instrument, in this case the bow has been turned round and it's the wooden side that is used. Listen to this. And you can still hear the notes from the motif, but we also get this very percussive and more mechanical sound as well, which kind of turns these basses into percussion instruments. Speaking of percussion, the last point to make before I end this video is that the choice of instrumentation can be further customized with different implements. For example, these drums are being brushed. And that's instead of being struck with sticks. This maintains the understated vibe as these additional percussion parts add to the momentum of the scene, but without dominating or adding too much power. So that's it. There's much more I could say, but I'll save other insights for other dedicated videos in this series. I hope you've learned something new and found it interesting to hear about motif and harmonic progression, instrumentation choice and tempo, the use of a musical pedal to build anticipation and tension, and finally, how different articulations and materials can further change the music.